Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday. What are we on? March 21st? Do I have that correct? Yes, that's right. March 21st, 2019. Trying desperately to set up a brand new desktop PC so that we can have at least another computer running. But I realize, of course, that everything can't be done all at once here. All right, why don't we get rid of this? And limp along, at least partially, on the one main computer, but I can at least turn to this desktop for my pocket list, and that's a good idea. I was hoping to be able to set up Skype on this thing so that I could follow Greg's articles without occupying the main computer, but I think that's too much trouble at the moment, unless, I don't know, somehow maybe I'm able, while we're working and during the break, to fix that thing. But, all right, it might be in place for next week. Maybe the laptop, too, or maybe we can even take our time in getting the laptop set up if I can get the PC set up well enough. Usually I don't use the PC at all. It was too slow. But now we've replaced it with a nice fast one, so that's good news. It is Thursday. It is the Thursday on which that basketball tournament, which I think you're not supposed to name. No, like the big football game, I think you're not allowed to talk about the big basketball tournament by name either. I don't know who comes and gets you, and I don't think it works for podcasts, but whatever. So, you know, and then, of course, people began to refer to it by their own nickname, and then they trademarked the nickname, too. So now you can't even, I don't know, I'm not sure what the rules really are, but Thursday morning on this occasion means exhaustion, because I'm an idiot and I can't just tell myself, why don't you not play in an NCAA plus another A, let's say, basketball tournament bracket. You don't like it, you don't like making picks, you don't like losing, and you don't win. So why do you do it? Plus, you got to stay up late because you always put it off and you don't start making any of your picks or research anything, and then you feel like, oh, I have to know everything about the teams that I can know in 15 minutes before the deadline comes. And you end up staying up late, and for what? I do not know. But yet I can't let go, because otherwise the rest of this month passes and I don't care. I'm not on watch. I mean, I don't really watch things anyway, but I'm not involved. I'm not talking about things. I'm not tracking how I'm doing. I don't know. I feel like that's an activity I want to be a part of, and I can't really explain it. Maybe it's how people come to Trump support somehow. I don't know. Is there any economic anxiety involved in it? I don't think so. Although I guess missing out on the pool would, I guess, count as economic anxiety. All right, let's see. It just occurred to me, I have to make sure that the various volumes on this new machine are turned down so that nothing explodes when I open any of these things. And even if there's auto playing video, we should be relatively safe from that. All right, lots to catch up on. Not much that I noticed anyway this morning by way of Twitter chatter that was occupying everyone's mind. But let's see. I definitely saw something this morning that was, I guess, counts as a new low. I think they referred to it that way for Trump. He's been on a bit of a tear criticizing the still dead John McCain over the last couple of days, and I'm not sure where he's going with this, but I did see a new topper, I thought, yesterday. Some video of him criticizing McCain, but where was he? Making a speech someplace at a tank factory, which is a very Soviet thing to do, I thought, which, as I understand it, is a place that the military wanted closed, or they felt it was no longer necessary to keep this place open and producing tanks that were, by some measure, not necessary, but Trump because it's a factory and it builds army stuff. He thought it would be a cool idea to keep this thing open. So he did what he had to do, I guess, to keep the thing open, went and made a speech there. I don't know how it came up. I think he was asked about it by the press. That's what it sounded like when he was complaining about the whole thing. I didn't really think he was going to bother going here, but he's now claiming not only credit for, but would like the thanks of the family and supporters too, I assume, for allowing John McCain to have a state funeral. He says, I gave him the funeral he wanted, which I had to approve, by the way. And nobody thanked me, but that's okay. He gave this great tell that's okay, and then the big sniff is that's Trump for it is not okay. I'm very angry about this thing. So I don't even know like when the insults to the guy stop. Although I guess I gotta give him some sort of credit for being partially, I don't know whether it's totally honest, but being honest about hating John McCain when nobody else is willing to say so. But it's extraordinarily unpresidential, but no one's going to make him pay for it. Johnny Isaacson was mad about it, and he said, I'm upset about that, and I'm going to say some words. And then that was the end of it. I heard about that yesterday from Greg Dworkin. He's back today to I don't know, is this on your radar, or is this, am I the only one watching this thing?
No, definitely. He was at a General Dynamics tank factory in Lima, Ohio. I believe Lima is the proper pronunciation.
Yes.
I think Ohio is the proper pronunciation.
Oh,
and Trump said that McCain didn't get the job done for veterans while the audience was silent.
Yeah.
And then he was complaining about not getting proper gratitude for McCain's funeral.
Right. That's what they should have been doing, is writing thank you notes for allowing a state funeral, which, I mean, I guess the president has to say yes.
Here's the note from the Washington Post story, which is one of the things that always gets me annoyed at reporters. I gave him the kind of funeral he wanted, which as president I had to approve, Trump said inaccurately.
Oh.
And then adds an apparent reference to allowing the use of military transport to carry McCain's body to Washington. Stop justifying what this guy's doing. Just report the lies.
Yeah, I don't know. Or just
I'm going to make it sound better because I'm going to make it sound like it actually has some grounding in making such a comment. It doesn't. It's totally whole cloth made up. Just put it that way.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know. I don't know why they do it. I mean, I think it's just habit.
It's reflex. It's like he's a president and he must have meant something real.
Yeah.
So let's go find out what it is.
That is standard practice for somebody who, shows that they're making an attempt, right, to try and
he's not normal.
Right.
Stop normalizing him. That's the whole point.
Yes.
Anyway, he goes on to say, I don't care about this. I didn't get a thank you. That's okay. We sent him on the way.
Sniff.
But I wasn't a fan of John McCain. I have to be honest. I never liked him much. Hasn't been for me. I really probably never will. Okay, so basically, he's still picking fights with a dead guy and losing. Yeah, Johnny Isaacson said some great things about how Trump is an idiot, but then again, is going to turn around and say I respect him and vote for everything he tells me to vote for.
Yeah.
So not interested. But I have to point out, and this is really annoying me this morning.
Yes.
One of the reasons that Trump is in the White House is smarmy cowards like Ted Cruz allowed Trump to attack his family and made a whole fuss about it and said, but I'm voting for him.
Yep.
So if you're going to be a coward, don't even, I think it'd be great if like reporters would go out and get an on the record statement from every single Republican senator on this. And by the way, while you're at it, why don't you include everybody that ran against Trump during the primary?
Sure. Why not?
Jeb Bush isn't a senator, but I want to know what he says. And I certainly want to know what Cruz says on the record about this. And ask him about Trump attacking his family. And I want him on the record about this. If you're going to be a smarmy coward with no backbone, just, put it on the record.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll be for that. I guess the complaint, I don't really know whether this was actually happening because you can't be sure when Trump says it, but I guess he says he's been being pursued by the press asking him, what do you think of McCain? Oh, I don't know why that would, except for the fact that he's attacking him now, they might be asking him that. But if they're asking him that, then they can ask senators, what do you think about what's going on with McCain?
Right, exactly. What do you think's going on with the president is what they should be asking.
Well, nothing's going on with McCain. Yes, that's true. That's
right, McCain's not
question.
doing anything right now, as far as I know.
Right. Oh, unless it's rolling over, that would be about it.
Right, and then the George Conway thing, stories in the paper there is that the reason George Conway is annoying Trump so much is he makes reference to Trump's mental stability, which for some reason appears to be a sore spot for Trump.
Yes, correctness is the reason.
Right, exactly.
Okay, well, yeah. All right, he's mentally unstable and unfit for the job. Good morning, everybody.
There's that.
Okay.
Here's in that line of thinking here, and I think this is a good lesson for reporters. This is a story in the New York Times entitled "How Companies Learn to Stop Fearing Trump's Twitter Wrath."
Oh, all right.
And if it's too long to read, I'll make it easy for you. They ignore him.
Oh, all right. Well,
they didn't used to. They used to worry that stock price would go up and down, and somehow or other they'd be called on the carpet to answer. Just ignore him. And it works fine for them, and that's what they do, and that's the way it goes. Daniel Dale points out Trump made 42 false claims last week. They included changing the date on his 2016 Scotland trip to make himself sound better, and changing the date McCain learned about the dossier to make McCain sound worse. So where is this all coming from with McCain? A report that McCain or a staffer of McCain's was partly responsible for getting the Michael Steele dossier to the FBI with the impending release of the Mueller report, and that's why Trump is going nuts about this.
I see. All right. Well, he's crazy.
He is, but he's very worried about the Mueller report, which we know because he told us he's not worried about it. And then he told us that he really would like to see the entire thing released. He'd also like, by the way, to sit down with Mueller and just straighten all this stuff out. Oh,
yeah, I'm sure that he would. He may even be convinced that he does want to sit down with Mueller. He's wrong. I mean, his lawyers will help him, maybe. Unless it's Rudy Giuliani. But I'm sure that he's under the impression that he can fix the whole thing if he just sits down with him.
Right, because he can con people into anything in his view.
This is the one thing he has not been able to override staff on.
Right, because they know that he's like a flight of ideas and he would just ramble all over the place.
Yes.
So Greg Sargent writes this morning, don't get snowed by Trump's supposed support for releasing the Mueller report. It may be that what the public learns of special counsel Mueller's findings is not that damaging, at least initially, but that's not as relevant as the spin from Trump allies and from some in the media make it seem, because we've already learned a tremendous amount. But that aside, it's simply absurd to read much into Trump's stated desire for the report to be released. And there's a way to call Trump's bluff on this, too. Release it.
Yes, okay.
Right. So there's a more pressing reason not to take this whole thing seriously. If Bill Barr, the Attorney General, really reveals little to Congress, at that point, House Democrats will probably try to subpoena the original Mueller report, as they have announced they'll do. And at this point, we'll really learn if Trump's supposed desire to see the report released means anything at all. So you don't have to take him at face value.
Okay, I don't take his face
stuff will just come up.
I can help it. Right. Whew. All right.
And here's another normalizing piece in the Washington Post.
Please.
Some have attributed Trump's apparent frustrations to the looming Mueller report, while others say he simply has fewer advisors to restrain him from airing his grievances.
Oh.
And all of them dancing around the fact that, he's damaged.
Well, yeah, okay.
Which is where all this stuff is coming from. But they won't say that. See, he's only being crazy because he doesn't have enough advisors around him to restrain him.
Yes, that's...
Well, how about he's only being crazy because he's crazy? Why don't you just come out and say that?
We might not have time for that.
Yeah.
I got to leave it there, I guess, maybe. When
I have to leave it there, right? Crazy stuff. So lots of propping up. So let's talk a little politics this morning.
All right.
It would be highly appropriate, I think, to lead off the substantive part of my discussion this morning with New Zealand.
All right.
They're banning military-style rifles, the Prime Minister says, days after mosque attacks had left 50 dead. Australia did it. New Zealand is doing it. We can't do it, but they are. So what they're going to do is they're going to have a buyback program, and it'll be launched to take existing weapons out of circulation, Gun owners who do not comply will be subject to fines. Apparently, the fines and the 3-year jail term will increase over time if you don't give them up. Keep your hunting weapons, but get rid of the military-style weapons. And apparently, the center-right opposition National Party supports the ban. It's imperative in the national interest to keep New Zealanders safe. Where's the National Rifle Association when you need them?
Other nation, probably. All right. Well, sure. Good luck to them. I mean, they can do that. They are a whole other country. So as it turns out, they're allowed to do more or less whatever they want there as long as they can pass it. And the NRA has nothing to say about it. That is astonishing.
Right. And then there's a separate discussion about the role of social media, of course, and how it lent itself to this sort of thing. And basically how unprepared places like Facebook and YouTube were to get rid of, for example, the live streaming of the murders.
Right.
No matter how many they took down, it would just go right back up. You know, a lot of that being fueled by the 4chan, 8chan crowd. But the point is, when you watch and see how easily they manipulated social media and got around that, you know, it brings to mind 2016 and the election and the troll farms and how effective they could be, because the people who were supposedly policing and watching for it at this end, you know, like Facebook, Twitter, had no idea, had no clue. They were just totally overwhelmed. Outmatched.
Yeah, there's no chance that they could be monitoring all these things, which on the one hand, I guess is supposed to be something of an excuse. Like, we can't know everything that's going on our app, but it's also, you've built something that's out of anyone's control, and is that a good idea? Although, you know, electronic freedom folks would say, sure, it's a fantastic idea. You should always be building things that are out of your control. But I guess then these things happen.
Right. So, you know, all of that, I think, just important to keep in mind as we look to see what happens in 2020. So let's talk.
Pretty predictable, really, though. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk some local politics. I just say U.S. politics.
All right. Which U.S.?
Which U.S.
state?
Us.
Yes. Which one of our United States should we talk about? Or the whole thing?
All of them.
No, all right.
Not just the blue ones or the red ones. Let's talk about all of them. Emerson polling, national polling came out the other day. Didn't have a chance to go over that. In a national poll, Bernie Sanders ties with Biden. They each get 26% within the Democratic electorate, with Kamala Harris at 12, Beto at 11, Elizabeth Warren at 8, Pete Buttigieg at 3, Cory Booker at 3. Everybody else is 1 or less. That includes Andrew Yang.
Okay.
I have to admit, Robert George, the friend of mine on Twitter, funny conservative from the New York Post, he's one of their editors, had a very funny comment about Andrew Yang. As you may know, Andrew Yang has 2 particularly important signature issues for himself. One is a universal national income.
Yes.
And the other is he's against circumcision.
Is he?
Yeah.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah. So Robert George says, look at those Democrats. They won't cut anything.
That's a good one.
So I thought that was pretty funny. I don't think Andrew Yang's going to be a major player, but he's tied with Amy Klobuchar and Tulsi Gabbard and Jay Inslee and John Hickenlooper. And they both, all of those, lead Kirsten Gillibrand, who comes in at 0.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So in that regard, I'm going to throw in a Harry Enton observation, and that is, he says, we still got a bit to go with Beto just 2 polls in after his launch, but in an average of the polls done completely before and completely after a campaign launched, Bernie got a 7-point bump, Beto got a 6-point bump, Kamala Harris got a 5-point bump. Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar, and Elizabeth Warren got 1-point bumps. So Bernie and Beto did the best in terms of making the rollout work. Kamala Harris's rollout also worked, as we observed. Everybody else's not so much.
Yeah, it's the alliteration. Yeah, Bernie bump, Beto bump. That's why he
it's the
goes
killer
by the
bees,
nickname.
right? So.
Yeah, right. So you can't. You got to come up with a different term that is alliterative if you want to get one of these things.
So Emerson, in addition to figuring out who was ahead in the Democratic primary, also had information about general election matchups, which are interesting. So Trump versus Biden, Biden wins by 10. Warren and Sanders each lead Trump by 2. Kamala Harris leads him by 4. Beto trails him by 2.
Okay.
Why is that relevant? It's a single poll. It's early. It doesn't matter, yada, yada. But for those who are going to be running on, you need to elect me as your candidate to oppose Trump because I am the most electable. Basically, only Biden can make that argument.
Okay.
And you'll see that with other polls that'll come out too. Which, by the way, there is some argument from the pundits that that's actually not so good for Bernie. Harry Enton has another piece here. Polls show Bernie Sanders' popularity among all voters is plummeting. That's not surprising because he's not the anti-establishment outsider attacking the front runner. Once you become the front runner, everybody attacks you.
Oh, true.
But with, for example, that Emerson poll, as Harry points out, Sanders, though, may have to convince Democratic voters he's electable. In our poll, just 30% of Democratic voters believe the party has a better chance of winning the presidency with him than somebody else. The vast majority, 59%, think they have a better shot at winning with someone else.
Oh.
So again, if your candidacy is going to be based on I'm the most electable, you have to be the most electable.
You can't just lie. I mean,
No, doesn't work.
Are you sure about that?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, maybe
We're talking about
Democrats.
Democratic primary here. We're not talking about Trump voters.
All right. Well, okay then.
Right?
Electability.
Show me the money. Show
Does
me
anybody have
not only
E
the
in
money,
name?
which Bernie's doing fine with.
There you go. Elizabeth's electable. She wins.
But show me the polls. Show me where it says that you're electable, because you'll be challenged on this.
Yeah. Well, she's the only one whose name starts with an E, and
So,
electability is the issue.
So killer E's, huh?
Yes.
So let's see. I think this is an Ed Kilgore piece.
Ed's electable.
Ed's electable. Ed Kilgore writing in New York Magazine, examining Bernie Sanders' electability argument. It's an article of faith among serious Bernie Sanders fans. He would have avoided Hillary Clinton's loss to Donald Trump. We all know that. Bernie would have won.
Yes.
Right? It's a thing. Still, I mean, we say it sardonically, and they say it like it's true.
I just read it, man. It's on the screen.
I just read it, right. Still, of all the reasons to vote for Bernie Sanders, you wouldn't expect he's the most electable candidate to rank all that high as compared to his often quite popular policy positions like Medicare for all or free college. Yet, there are signs his 2020 campaign will heavily emphasize a claim that he's the right candidate for those whose main concern is driving Trump out of office. There's an Associated Press on that story. And he's talking about whether or not he truly is electable. Nate Silver took a look at it, too. It's interesting for Bernie to be running on electability. We're going to have to live with candidates cherry-picking polls. But one of the ones Bernie picked showed him 2 points ahead of Trump, and that's not very much. Okay, that's the same poll, the Emerson poll, that showed Biden ahead by 10, for example.
Yes. Is there any plans to move
so
Celinda Lake over to Emerson by any chance? Emerson Lake polling? Is there any way we can get that to happen?
So.
No? All right.
Let's see what we have here.
I'll talk to you.
So basically, what Ed says is as we get closer to 2020, we'll find out if Democrats can ignore the unwashed members of the electorate and decide how and whether to bring them home. At that point, general election polls could begin to matter, and how candidates and voters alike respond to electability questions will matter more than the assertions of any particular campaign. So basically, I don't know. No. I don't know. Democratic voters certainly have said that they want the most electable candidate.
I do too.
That seems pretty clear, and so that's probably why all the candidates are doing that. But you better bring the bacon.
I guess.
Even if you're a vegan, show me the bacon. Show me the money.
Bring the tofu. Something.
Show me the polls that say you're actually ahead.
Yeah. Well,
because if you say that you're the most electable, and then a poll comes out saying you're not, like that's it. It's over.
Just one. Probably take one or two. Or you can't be at the bottom of the list, certainly.
It's not a persuadable argument. It's not a persuasive argument, I should say. if the polls are saying that what you just said isn't true.
That would be problematic. If you're in the mix, I guess you can say eventually I'll be at the top. But Andrew Yang, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many people are angry about circumcision out there. There used to be a guy at Daily Kos
I was going to
say
say, some people make it their issue.
That is
their signature issue.
You could understand. I mean,
but Robert George is right. Democrats don't want to cut anything, so I don't think that's going anywhere.
Not as a presidential platform, certainly. But, well, I don't know. Maybe all of a sudden everyone will realize how crazy the whole thing is.
Pro tip, stay off Instagram. So this will be Bloomberg now. I just want to throw this in before our break. Dump Electoral College. Some 2020 Democrats back liberals' goals. Eliminate the Electoral College. Pack the Supreme Court.
Why not?
Do things that are actually different. And, Elizabeth Warren and others are saying, well, that's because we got new people in the electorate, younger people. And the Midwest was turned off by things as they were. And let's make some changes.
All right.
And that's really going to be the Democratic primary right there. Those who want that much change and those who don't.
Right. Circumcision. That's a big change. But, yeah, I think.
You got a new machine now?
There is at least one new machine happening. Yeah, it's not
Is it going to make music? Because it's 9:27. I don't hear music.
Right. Oh, we're 6 seconds from the music. The regular machine is online and ready to make the music now. There we go.
There it is.
Yeah, the new machine that's sort of running is a PC that I've got that I can open up some of these articles on, and even if they start blaring auto-playing video, it should be okay.
So we won't hear it.
The screen is very big and extremely bright, and I'm going to have to work on that during the breaks. It's like
you got to get up earlier or maybe wear sunglasses when you do the show.
Yeah, there was no getting up earlier today, but everybody slept late. Okay, we'll be right back in 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com.
Start setting system display brightness in that order.
Okay, I'll try that. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Here we go. Start settings. I'm working on my way through a new PC to turn this screen thing down, but start settings. What?
Systems display brightness.
Okay. All right. All right. I think I'm in the wrong place for this one. Okay, I'll try it again. Later on.
Sunglasses.
Yeah, that's the next thing. We're going to find some sunglasses and some sunblock and try not to get burned. This may be why Trump is so orange.
Yeah, I guess so. So before the break, we were talking about this Bloomberg piece here. Here's a quote. Adrienne Elrod, former spokeswoman for the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton, who won the popular vote in 2016, but lost in the Electoral College to Trump. That's good to know.
Yeah.
People, I think Ariel Edwards-Levy observed, if you're having trouble getting into the Electoral College, you might try sneaking in as a rowing expert.
Right, water polo also works.
Yeah. You've got younger people and newer faces who have constituents empowering them to buck the normal trends. They're saying, who cares if that's how it was always done, talking about things like the Electoral College.
Yeah.
But there's still a good chunk of Democratic primary voters who don't want major changes. They're happy with the status quo as long as Donald Trump is not in office. It's a tension the Democratic voters will have to reconcile in next year's caucuses and primaries.
Oh, caucuses, right.
Right? And that's the thing. So, like, if you say, listen, voter suppression is preventing us from winning, and the Republicans will say, well, that's because you're sore losers.
Oh. Well, no.
Right.
They will say that. You're right.
But the fact that there actually is discussion in the Electoral College is really interesting because the reflexive response from Republicans is, of course, that's a ridiculous idea. But it turns out it's fairly popular with the public, like most ideas that they think is ridiculous.
Yeah, that does test well, but sort of background checks.
It doesn't mean that. I mean, the shall I dare say it? Yeah, I will. The process for actually changing it is impossible, but the sentiment is there. So if you're going to run on this is what I want to do rather than I promise you I'm going to do it, those are two separate things.
Ah, okay. Well, yeah. Well, it's usually there's always that tension. I think I found the brightness.
Yay! Did you turn it up?
Yes, I did. That? Right. I didn't need those retinas anyway.
Yeah, who needs them? Retinas are overrated. So I think one of the big long pieces from today also that I think is just really fascinating is by Alex Perrine. It's in The New Republic. It's called Nihilist in Chief, The Banal, Evil, All-Destructive Reign of Mitch McConnell. Really a nice piece.
Yeah, okay. Let me take a look at this. The next project is this is a very loud mouse came with this. A lot of extraordinarily loud clicking. I'm very picky.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, you got to make it,
It has to be right.
Okay. You have to customize it.
Nihilist
Did you find the piece there?
Yep, got it.
Nihilist in Chief with Mitch's smiling face there. So, the whole point of this piece is, pan back a moment to savor the larger power dynamics in play here. As he was lecturing Democratic reformers on the folly of voting rights expansion, that fits right in with our Electoral College discussion.
Okay.
McConnell was crippling the basic operations of government to assuage the bigoted vanity of the Republican president. Recall that the continuing resolution to finance the government without wall funding at the end of the 115th Congress passed overwhelmingly in the chamber he leads, and that he vigilantly squelched successive House versions of the same funding plan throughout the month-long shutdown for no reason except they didn't want to be the person to end it. This isn't mere lefty hyperbole. At one critical juncture in the shutdown, Lindsey Graham, the Trump White House's key Senate liaison, left a conference with the Senate Majority Leader to blurt the quiet part out loud to CNBC producer Karen James Sloan. Leader McConnell said, is going to let the White House figure out what move they want to make. The leader's waiting to see what the White House wants to do. So much, in other words, for all the sonorous talk of the U.S. Senate as the world's most august deliberative body. Maybe they meant in August.
Right, that's when they'll deliberate.
That's when they'll deliberate. Its most powerful majority leader over the past decade is an errand boy for both an errant billionaire class of campaign donors and an errant billionaire president. And what's more, that's how McConnell wants it.
Oh.
Okay? And then he points out, leftist critics of the plutocratic drift of conservative ideology, which is to say American politics these days, appreciate the materialist candor of McConnell's thug agenda in a way that the true believing right never has. The fabled small government evangelical base of Republican national politics has always distrusted and hated Mitch McConnell. This was brought home to me forcefully at the 2016 Republican National Convention as I watched from the press seats Reince Priebus introduce the Senate Majority Leader as the temporary chairman of the convention, and the boos outweighed the cheers. And the Mitch McConnell they were booing was pretty much peak Mitch McConnell. At the moment, he was in the middle of the greatest stand of his career, refusing to allow a Democratic president to fill a Supreme Court vacancy. And they hated him.
Right, true.
Right? They know on the right that McConnell isn't really a part of their movement. He's got no core. What they haven't seemed to grasp, though this finally may be changing, that he is the primary reason that politics have had any excess, that their politics have had any excess at all in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Right? He may be the man that saved their movement from the utter destruction of its electoral vehicle, the GOP, basically because he knows process.
Yes. Well, that's powerful but not popular.
Exactly. And that's why this is such a fascinating story. So
I'm doomed.
When magazine writers go for the McConnell profile, they usually run aground on the rocks of his complete non-presence. That's not much to say in the way of illuminating personal anecdata in the man's biography, so they cast him as the master deal maker, despite his lack of actual deals. He tends to get a lot of credit for belatedly signing off on unsatisfactory ends to artificial crises that he threw in action allowed to fester. But, he's lived through this before, and basically, he's a honey badger. He don't care.
Yeah, I guess not. He keeps getting elected for whatever reason. You would think Kentucky would want a bigger personality somehow.
Well, so Perrine goes on to say, if you read enough about Mitch McConnell and you come to see him as a man of pure ambition and little else. And its ambition pointed in a strangely specific direction, which is running the Senate. The Senate itself.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay? That's what he wants to do, and that's what he does. And so, again, you got to give him credit for that which he does.
He
But
does what he loves.
there's nothing else. If you're looking for a core, you're not going to find it.
No.
If you're looking for principles, they're not there.
Yeah. I don't think you could even get anything out of Elaine if you asked her.
Right? So
He's nice.
a really fascinating piece
He's
about
fine.
that.
Really? Okay. Well, that is kind of fascinating look at a person who's not at all fascinating.
Right. It's really hard to find something fascinating. So when you go down there and look deeper, there's nothing there.
That's it. What's really, truly fascinating about this guy is that.
Right. And this is a really well done
cares.
researched piece pointing out all the reasons why you might think that there was there's nothing there.
We asked his
There's
mom.
nothing there.
And
And yet,
said, he's okay.
everybody in the Republican Party hates him.
Yeah.
No friends, but many allies, as they describe it.
Okay. So nobody hangs out with the McConnells.
Would you?
McConnell chows. No.
No.
Not even, I mean, politics aside, I don't think you could have a decent conversation with him.
Right. And again, look at this in the background of what the Democrats are trying to do in this primary, as they do every primary, which is to try to sort out, do we want the guy who inspires us? Maybe I'll go with a Beto or a Bernie. Mm-hmm. Do I want the guy who I think is going to be the practical best choice to win, even though that may not be true as we get closer, which would be a Joe Biden? Am I going with policy, in which case I'll do an Elizabeth Warren? Do I want a change, which is a small change? It's basically keep things the way they were, but get rid of Trump. That would be an Amy Klobuchar, for example, or somebody like that. And on the Republican side, you have a guy who doesn't inspire, who doesn't necessarily represent anything except getting large donors to be happy and keeping any Democratic initiatives off the floor of the Senate. And that would be Mitch McConnell. And really, the only way you're going to change that, you're never going to be able to deal with him, I guess is my point. Just as Obama could not deal with the Republican House, there is no way that even a Democratic president is ever going to be able to deal with a Republican Senate, as Obama learned when he nominated Merrick Garland, somebody that Orrin Hatch thought was a great choice. Right? These are not folks you can work with. It's not because we're hostile or because we're against compromise, but you have to step back and recognize when you can work with somebody and when you can't. And McConnell is just not somebody you can work with. No.
That's true.
He has no core. He is totally in the pocket of whoever pays the party.
Yeah, I mean, that's
and
how
he
you
just
work
don't
with
care.
him, I guess.
He's not going to do anything for the country. That's just not going to happen. So.
No, not interested, and the country's not interested in him. So
right.
he's not going to.
So it's mutual.
Do us the favor. Oh, I'm so interested in you.
Right, and that's why I think that when Democrats run, they really are not going to be able to make the case that I'm the guy that can pull everybody together. Come on. You're talking about working with Mitch McConnell and Mark Meadows. Explain how that works.
Yeah, and people are kind of catching on to that, and it is.
Oh, well, I'll work with Jim Jordan instead. Okay,
yes.
fine.
People are saying it nonetheless, which is amazing, which is kind of like, where have you been? John Hickenlooper and several other people who are pretty sure they can bring everybody together.
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, that's Cory Booker's biggest weakness.
Yeah, well, that's what he came to Washington to try that, and all right, well, that's what was he at 1% or was he at 3%?
Oh, he was a 1%er.
All right.
Only Kirsten Gillibrand was 0.
Yes, right. There were a couple of ones, as I recall.
Yeah, there was a bunch of ones.
0.
Right, but wow. Again, we're still talking about the major players as being Biden, Bernie, Beto, and Kamala Harris. Right now, at this particular point in time, somebody like Pete Buttigieg is going to have to make a move that, right now doesn't appear to be there. And Bill Scher, who I know Armando hates, made some interesting points here. Democrats' donor measuring contest. The DNC made small donors a debate threshold, and now many Dems are starting to regret it. Now, this is reporting, not opinion. There are Democrats who regret it. You know, one of the people who regrets it? Joe Biden. Kirsten Gillibrand, Amy Klobuchar. These are people that can raise money through the traditional large donor groups, but not necessarily the kind of online stuff that that Bernie and Beto can put together.
Yeah. There are a couple of different measures, a couple of different metrics. And I don't think you have to meet them all. I think you have to meet some combination or minimum number of two. So if you get donors from a certain number of states, that counts. Then there's the number of individual donors, which I thought was an interesting thing to throw in there. But then we read about how Andrew Yang was the first one to qualify by sort of gaming that system, or his supporters did that.
And also, by the way, does us a service by pointing out some language that you should watch for. For example, Beto emphasized that he had 128,000 unique contributions in the first 24 hours and $47 average, right? And so that's a lot of unique contributions, and he raised a lot of money, $6.1 million.
Right.
But unique donors is not the same thing as unique contributions.
Oh.
You could give 47 5 times, and it will be 5 unique contributions.
That is a
one donor
catch. Is that what's happening, or is that just
he doesn't
a
know.
possibility?
He says we don't even know how many individual people donated because unique contributions is not the same thing as unique donors.
That's true.
Similarly, the average contribution doesn't take into account multiple contributions by the same person, while Sanders often touted an average contribution of, wait for it, $27.
Yes.
During his 2016 bid, his average donor gave roughly $90 to his campaign.
Okay.
Right? Campaign and the media play the numbers game because of the widely held presumption that a candidate funded by small donors, the smaller the better, is one who is funded by and will govern for, quote, the people. And that really is scare quotes. By the same line of thinking, a candidate reliant on cash from wealthy benefactors will be beholden to the 1%. But what if that's wrong?
Then, I don't know.
Having the biggest small donor army doesn't make a candidate the best reflection of the will of the people because a relatively small set of donors, large and small, isn't necessarily composed of a cross-section of America. Think caucus. And having considerable support among wealthy donors doesn't force a candidate to enact policies that favor the elite few over the common good unless you're Mitch McConnell and you have no core. Oh, I added that. He didn't have that, but it's true.
That sounds familiar. It's awfully strange of him to take that.
Yeah. Anyway. So it's interesting. Elizabeth Warren told Rachel Maddow she'll set the standard by going to grassroots funding, which may or may not help her. She may have done it because she wasn't getting funding otherwise. But just make some interesting points here that, you know, things are, as often in politics, not always what it seems.
Well,
so
that's a very
look
good
for
point,
individual
obviously.
donors if they tell you that. That's way more important than individual
I will be very interested to see whether that holds up as a distinction. I mean, it makes sense, but he's just guessing that it wasn't simply a strange word choice. It would be it would be fascinating to find out that that's the case. People would be very upset, I think, by that.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Eventually, I guess we get that information, but we'll see. Yeah. So keep an eye on that. Maybe that's something that reporters can actually ask him about.
Yeah, I guess so. Although, and why not? I mean, last time they spent that much time asking Elizabeth Warren, "Are you running?" And she was like, "Honest to God, I'm not." No. Well, do you mean not currently?
Right.
You remember that?
Not by tonight? Do you mean? No, what do you mean?
They were willing to parse words there. So I don't know. I think that's a good point and a good question. It may turn out to be nothing, but then fine. That'd be great if it was nothing. But if it's true, that's very clever. Somebody should get a bonus, except they got caught. So then we'll claw the bonus back.
So there's 2018 CCES data that's out. And I have a tweet here from Alexander Gajanian.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes. Oh, there he is.
Research associate at MIT Election Lab.
Oh.
And he says, this is interesting. White Democrats continue huge movement left on issues of race into 2018. And really, really big shifts. And he's got what's called a racial resentment battery item by party. Right? Generations of slavery and discrimination have created conditions that make it difficult for blacks to work their way out of the lower class. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, okay.
Versus Irish, Italian, Jewish, and many other minorities overcame prejudice and worked their way up. Blacks should do the same without any special favors. Which camp do you fall in?
Yes, the
David,
other one.
which camp do you fall in?
The other one.
Right.
The first one.
The first one. Generations of slavery
Yes.
and discrimination have created conditions that make it difficult for blacks to work their way out of the lower class. Now, this is
That's
among
because
white
Irish never
respondents
overcame.
only.
Okay.
Okay? So, Republicans, back in 2010, only 13% agreed with you. That generations of slavery and discrimination have created conditions that make it difficult for blacks to work their way out of the lower class. In 2010, 13.3% of Republicans thought that, and now 15.6% of Republicans.
Yeah.
So over the years, and this is done every 2 years, nothing has changed.
Yeah. It
For
went
independents,
down, actually.
however,
Yeah.
independents went from similar thinking to Republicans in 2010, 12, and 14, 16.9, 17.6. But in 2016, that went up to 28.2, and now it's at 31.6. That's a pretty significant jump from 16.9 to 31.6. It's doubled
Yeah.
from 2010 to 2018 among independents. And with Democrats, 45% back in 2010 agreed. These are white respondents only. For Democrats, for white Democrats, 45% agreed with the sentiment that generations of slavery and discrimination have created conditions that make it difficult for blacks to work their way out of the lower class. 45% agree with that in 2010. It's 71% now. Again, a very significant jump. And if you look at the other side of the question, Irish, Italian, Jewish, and many other minorities overcame prejudice and worked their way up. Blacks should too. Republicans haven't changed. 81% agreed with that. 81.8% agreed with that in 2010. 84% now, so no change. Not much change among those who agree who are independents. 61.7% then, 59.3% now. But for Democrats, it used to be 47. In other words, Democrats back in 2010 used to split evenly on that question. And now 71% agree that generations of slavery and discrimination have created conditions that make it difficult for blacks to move out of the lower class. And only 27% agree now that Irish, Italian, Jewish, and many others overcame prejudice, worked their way up. Blacks should too.
Yes.
So a big shift within white voters of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Well, they just
While
saw
Republicans still remain racist.
They just saw the Republicans bashing the Irish, so it took a dive.
Amazing.
That is pretty interesting how that has shifted, and good. I assume it's because, in part because a lot of, white Democrats have noticed on Twitter, look at the video of how often black people confronted by police are mistreated and shot.
Right. And so for all the complaints about social media and what it doesn't do, it also does that, so that's why it's such a complex question to try to address the issue of what is social media bringing us in 2019. The answer is a lot, and you still have to filter it out yourself.
Yep.
Anyway, I'll leave it with that.
That's very interesting.
That's the end of my segment. You're on your own now, kid.
Okay. I was a little worried about racial resentment battery items by party. I thought that sounded kind of scary, but it seems to be pretty good info. I like that. That's telling. Even if we can't pronounce the guy's name. What did we say? Adgajanian?
I'm suspecting he's Armenian.
Okay. Well, how could Alexander Agajanian be Armenian?
How could it be? It's possible. Anything's possible in 2019.
It's a tongue twister. He probably sells seashells by the seashore, too.
Well, as long as you can say that on your new machine, that's great. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning, now with increased brightness.
Yes.
And I'll be back on Monday, and we'll do it again. I don't know what you're going to talk about for the next hour, but you know what? That's your
screen,
problem.
I guess. But, okay, very good. Thanks, Greg.
All righty. Take care.
Appreciate it. Thanks for taking us through the first hour and giving me a chance to try and for some instructions on how to find the brightness on this PC. And it's much better now. I'm okay now, everybody. Let's see. Now, if I can use the machine correctly and it doesn't click too loud, I can get over to Pocket, make a little bit of noise, and tell you what's in store for the next few minutes and in the second hour. First of all, I think we have to note Hope Hicks. How does she do it? She gets back in the news. What is she doing in the news? That I don't know yet because we haven't read the story, but we're going to. Former White House staffer Hope Hicks, how does she do it? To cooperate with Dems' probe into Trump. How and why would she do that, I guess, is the next question. Let me see. Can I enlarge the portion of the screen this thing occupies? Yes, good. Okay. Pop-ups. Pop-ups bigger and brighter than ever on my new screen. The claim is she's going to cooperate with the congressional investigation, I guess. Let's take a look at this. Tal Axelrod is the writer here. Hope Hicks, a former White House communications director, will cooperate with the House Judiciary Committee and provide documents to the panel in its probe of President Trump and his administration, if you think he has one. This in The Hill, by the way. Representative Jerry Nadler, perhaps you've heard of him, chairman of the committee, requested documents from Hicks earlier this month on a variety of topics, including former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's false statements to the FBI, the firing of former FBI Director James Comey, and the payments made in connection to President Trump's alleged affairs. Committee spokesperson Daniel Schwartz confirmed to The Hill that Hicks intends to comply with Nadler's request, one of very few people, I guess, indicating that they will comply. The people inside the administration still insist that they will not, and I guess because Hope Hicks is out of it, and I don't know whether she's been offered any sort of protection or coverage or possibly pardons down the line or anything like that, or now that she's out, she doesn't get that sort of thing. Not sure. But she says she's going to comply. I don't know whether she will or not, and you got to wait until that stuff gets into Democratic hands and find out whether it's responsive to the question and if they suspect that she might have something else. I mean, Hope Hicks is kind of capable of anything, and there's no reason to expect that just because they say they're going to comply, they really will, and nor is there any reason to believe that just because paper has been handed to you that it is responsive paper. You know how these guys are with their paperwork. That's another story looming out there, which we'll get to after, maybe after the break. Let's see how the rest of this story goes. Nadler asked Hicks for documents from, quote, any personal or work diary, journal, or other book containing notes, a record or description of daily events about Trump. He must have heard that she was a journal keeper or something like that. But anything with notes about Trump, the Trump campaign, the Trump organization, and the executive office of the president, according to CNN. So it's going to be really embarrassing when they get a hold of those notebooks and the margins are filled with, Mrs. Hope Trump or something like that, written over and over in fancy script. Democrats expressed frustration with Hicks last year. I've expressed it for a long time, saying she did not answer all their questions about her time in the White House during a private appearance in front of the House Intelligence Committee. Republicans on the Judiciary Committee told The Hill on Monday that 8 individuals and entities have already provided the panel with a total of 8,195 pages related to its sprawling investigation into President Trump's administration, campaign, and businesses. It's actually not a whole lot of pages. I mean, it's a big number of pages to have to read. I wouldn't want to have to read them, but I don't know how much it really is in terms of volume in a production like this. Among those 8 are the National Rifle Association and former Trump campaign aides George Papadopoulos, who probably has no paper at all because he's just not an organized guy. Stephen Bannon, who's drowning in it, I'm sure, but isn't giving the real stuff over. J.D. Gordon and Sam Nunberg. Nadler said he was, quote, encouraged by the responses so far to his request earlier this month for documents from 81 individuals and entities in the probe focusing on obstruction of justice, public corruption, and abuses of power. Monday was the deadline to submit the requested documents. The New York Democrat added that others had asked for a friendly subpoena to have public cover for their cooperation with the panel's probe. That's an interesting thought. They want to be subpoenaed so that they can point to that as the reason for their response and say, I have no other choice but to respond because otherwise they'll hold me in contempt, except I don't know how well that was going to work. I mean, maybe with the average person who's not paying a whole lot of attention, but why would such a person be angry with voluntary response to the committee? But yeah, okay. Whatever. You want a subpoena, you'll get it. A friendly subpoena as opposed to, no, I really expect that you're going to try and resist this and we're going to have to go to court over this subpoena. Friendly subpoena would just be, well, my boss needs paperwork. Okay, well, I'll give you a subpoena then. Schwartz told The Hill that the panel had no intention of sending out a second wave of document requests. And there the language makes a difference, right? Bill Scher will watch closely request documents versus subpoenas. We have no definite plans to send out a second wave. That is also may mean we have no plans to expand the scope of our original request of 81 people. There's no 82nd person right now. No plans for it anyway. Nor do we have a list of names for a possible second wave. It is possible that there will be additional document requests at some point. There is that. I don't know if there'll be second requests of the same people or not. But nothing like this story describes, Schwartz said, responding to a Wall Street Journal report saying a second round of requests was in the works. So, well, we'll see whether that comes to pass or not. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about, since papers and paperwork came up, the fact that the Trump administration never does their homework, never prepares their paperwork, and you should never ever believe that they have the ability to produce it because it doesn't exist under any circumstances, anywhere, anytime. And we'll prove it after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Confused once again by the gigantic screen immediately to my right. My eye wants to go to it, even though I've turned the brightness down. Maybe if I turn the brightness down even more, my eyes won't want to go to it. But I need to read it now. So we'll experiment with that later. I told you we had proof of concept after the break. I keep telling you, yeah, right, personally. The rest of you, shh, I'm not talking to you. You. Everybody involved in the Trump family, the Trump administration, anything to do with Trump, the likelihood that they're lying about basic facts is always enormous. When it comes to paperwork, check everything. And I've forgotten so far to remind people that they should be looking at this. I don't think that they actually necessarily faked this one, but it would be my practice if I were on Capitol Hill in particular, let's say, to double, triple, quadruple check every single document that came my way from the Trump administration. I would say the odds of catching them out on this one are extremely low, but I would like to see the documentation on the purported veto of the resolution disapproving of the president's declaration of the state of emergency, the fake emergency on the southern border. It's a simple matter, ordinarily, for people who know what they're doing. And while I do think that there's an active policy of encouraging people to, well, one, be fast and loose with everything, two, don't worry so much about the paperwork, etc. I also think there's the problem of we don't really know anything about the paperwork and what's necessary and don't know where to turn to find out. So sometimes we wing it. The evidence for this, I think I would say, is the early going on the executive orders, which all turned out to be legal flops. They were issuing executive orders just based on, well, if Stephen Miller concocts it and puts it on the right kind of paper and inside the right kind of folder and asks Donald Trump to sign it and then show it to the press, that equals a valid executive order. And that's not really necessarily the case. I don't know executive order process. I've never dealt with it, but I'm fairly confident in saying that there's probably a pretty strict process that has to be followed. And it's strict in the sense that you must follow it, not in the sense that it's difficult or hard to navigate. From one administration to the next, they generally will not have a problem with this, even if they don't hold over staff from previous White Houses to show them how to do this, which does happen even as between bitter rivals and presidents of different party. They can generally work together on that because they want the country to be able to function no matter who's in charge. Whereas I'm not sure whether anybody would stick around and help Trump with it, nor do I think Trump and his people would allow anyone to stick around and help them with it. They literally may have, if it's as simple as, well, it has to be on, 8.5 by 14 inch, like legal size paper, but parchment in order to count. I don't know that we really have such a rule, and I don't know why we ever would, but I've seen dumber rules. You can be sure that the Trump administration people don't know that and don't know how to find that out, and were never aware of it, and would print it on whatever is in their regular old inkjet printers or whatever, and hand it in as completed work, thinking it had been done correctly, and it would turn out not to be the case. Or they didn't bother to look at any other executive orders. They just imagined what they think an executive order looks like or sounds like. And in some cases here, it would be, it could make a real difference. I don't really know the procedure, but for instance, it may be the fact that a valid executive order must cite, authority in law or the Constitution, and the Millers and Bannons of the world may, in the first couple of days, have thought all you really have to do is say, whereas I totally want this to happen, therefore be it now resolved, or some kind of stupid magic language like that, and they would just put their wish list into the form of what they thought was an executive order and hand it over. Or they didn't do their legal research. They just thought that the president could order stuff because the president is really cool, and they screwed these things up. This is a slightly different case, but from the beginning, I have always thought that there were at least two problems running in parallel with respect to paperwork. One was they didn't know how to do things and didn't care how to do things and thought it was, very beta to ask. And two, they had no idea that they needed such things and so never bothered to prepare them or ask about their being prepared. There's also a strain of now I'm the president, I can do whatever I want. But I think that these guys thought that they were entitled all along. And so Donald Trump would probably in private life have skipped out on a lot of paperwork and just said, I'll straighten it out with the mayor later if we're in trouble. We'll give a little money, whatever. We'll make it work. So I think one of the last two is at work here. Either I didn't, bother to find out what I needed to do paperwork-wise, or I'm very rich and I probably don't need to do anything ahead of time. And if I'm ever in trouble, I'll just fix it, is going on here. Another piece in the Hill, Rachel Frazin, F-R-A-Z-I-N. Sorry, Rachel. New York City official, NYC for short. NYC official accuses Kushner companies of illegally operating buildings without certification. Because why would you need certification? New York City Councilman Richie Torres on Tuesday accused Kushner companies of illegally operating 9 buildings without a certificate of occupancy. Now, it may startle you to know, if you are not in the real estate business, that you would need a certificate of occupancy for any of these buildings, and I don't know whether they are office buildings or residential buildings, but I could see somebody brand new to real estate saying, look, I bought a property and I rented it out. What do I need a certificate of occupancy for? Well, turns out you do. But if you're in the real estate business, you would know that. Or you would know how far you could go in skipping it and then bribing people later. We've come to discover that Kushner Companies is illegally operating buildings without a certificate of occupancy, said Torres. That would naturally follow from his believing that, I guess. It's a great opening paragraph and follow-up, isn't it? But Torres heads the council's Committee on Oversight and Investigation. What an amazing parallel it has here. Our investigation reveals that there are 9 properties in the portfolio of Kushner Companies that have no certificate of occupancy, and one of those properties has gone 6 years without a certificate of occupancy. And I think, generally speaking, that's the sort of thing I would guess that everybody in the city, even if they know who owns a building, and very often they don't, who owns this building? It may say Kushner all over it in gold letters like Trump does. I don't think they do the same thing. But, for instance, when was the last time anybody asked, does Trump Tower have a certificate of occupancy? And you would ask that question and people would say, I'll admit, I don't know offhand whether it really does or not, or even where to go to look to find out. But, probably, right? It is occupied. That'd be ridiculous to find out that the president lives in a building that doesn't even have a certificate of occupancy. What would we make of that? I don't know what we would make of it. But let's find out. Is there where do you go to find it? I don't know. And of course, you may go to look and ask at the office and they would scoff at you. Of course, the president's home has a certificate of occupancy. It's Trump Tower. They know what they're doing. They're in the real estate business. Yeah, well, Kushner Companies don't have any. Are you sure? Well, it sounds like somebody found out. Here is a tweet from Richie Torres, who tweets as Richie Torres. Today we are revealing how Kushner Company is operating illegal apartment buildings, in the city. And here is a link to the video, I guess. So somebody went and looked, and I'm sure the assumption was, of course, there's a certificate of occupancy. I wonder what they were looking for, or what inspired them to check, if not this program or my tweets telling you, check everything. Don't assume that they've done the paperwork just because you have to in order to be doing business, and they're doing business. So, therefore, that must be the case. Torres called upon the city's Department of Buildings, or DOB, to take action against Kushner Companies. We cannot stand by idly. They have for 6 years, but we can't any longer. No owner is above the law, not even the family of the President of the United States, and a senior White House advisor, for God's sake. A Kushner Company's spokesperson told The Hill that it inherited certificates of occupancy with various issues from its prior owners. 2 of the certificates in question expired when President Trump's advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was the firm's CEO, according to the Associated Press, and that makes sense too, because he didn't go to school or anything, and no one would have told him, oh yeah, by the way, you need a certificate of occupancy for your buildings. It probably never comes up. Similar to many other landlords, we inherited from prior owners certificates of occupancy with various issues, the company told The Hill in a statement. I know, The Hill just told me about your statement a second ago. Kushner will continue the long and detailed process to work with our consultants and the Department of Buildings to correct every issue outstanding. A spokesman for the DOB told The Hill in a statement that it has inspected the buildings and found them to be safe. That's the point of this thing. DOB's top priority is safety, and indeed we have inspected all these buildings or renovated units and deemed them safe to occupy, spokesman Andrew Rodansky said. He slammed findings referenced by Torres, though, as pure grandstanding. I don't really know why that would be the case, except that he must be a Trump supporter. But if they don't have certificates of occupancy, then they don't have certificates of occupancy. What's the slam about this? I just find it fascinating, the possibility that the sort of documentation assumed by everyone to be, like, well, of course they have it level of background and information and certification. It's just not there. And if you just take a look, you'll find giant holes in it. Also, of course, it's very interesting that Jared Kushner has come to Washington. Remember, I guess he was supposed to come as the moderating influence and talk the president out of pursuing and harassing the undocumented. It turns out that Kushner is undocumented, at least in terms of his right to have the buildings he owns be occupied and paying him rent. So I guess we're going to have to deport him at this point. I'm not sure where you send a guy like that, but it's interesting, like I said, to come to Washington to support a regime dedicated first and foremost to the harassment of those without legal documentation. And it turns out, what do you know? They lack legal documentation as well. But of course, they're white, and if that doesn't work, they are themselves. And as you know, stuff like that doesn't apply to us because we are gimmitarian. So, like I said, check that veto. Before you have the veto override vote, whether you think it will succeed or not, just double check and make sure that a valid veto message has been delivered. But I might suggest that you wait until 10 days have passed since you presented the resolution to the president, because constitutionally, if he doesn't issue a valid veto inside of those 10 days, it becomes law. Although I suppose there's room on this Supreme Court for saying, well, the president was of the opinion that he had. It was his belief, his genuine and sincere belief, that he had issued a veto message and had done so properly, and so therefore that should be enough. I really do think there was a pretty good chance that Trump, at first, who was, I think, was late to the ceremony he decided to hold in order to sign this veto message, and I thought it was going to be broadcast on C-SPAN, and I watched, and I did not see it. I actually sat down to look for it, and I don't know whether he decided at the last minute not to do it on camera or what, but I had the sneaking suspicion that he thought that vetoing a bill had a big red rubber stamp that said veto on it, maybe with a big red X or something like that, that you would stamp on the bill, because although I think the likelihood of his having seen Schoolhouse Rock at any point is pretty low, I just think that it has seeped into the public consciousness. There was actually quite a few people I noticed who did say, oh, I thought there was a stamp for veto and not, it wasn't a signature thing. And I probably thought that too at some point until I watched a veto or read about the description of a veto message being delivered. And I think I've read veto messages and I've noticed that, yes, it's just a note about why you're vetoing something, and it's signed by the president, which is kind of strange. I mean, I guess the stamp makes a certain amount of sense. Like the signature is usually associated with the idea of approving the legislation. They should do something different. And I was wondering whether Trump was holding things up, saying, where's the stamp? Can't you get me a stamp? I want to have a stamp. Well, the stamp doesn't do it. You got to sign it. Well, I'll sign it if that's what makes it legal. But I also think there should be a stamp. Also, can't somebody make a stamp that says veto? And as while you're at it, I want a stamp for ones that I like that says okay or right on, because I saw that video I was watching with Barron one time. Oh, that would be maybe more Ivanka's time than Barron. I don't know. Is it still on? Schoolhouse Rock? Okay. Not really sure exactly how that plays today. All right, let's see. A couple other interesting items of note. Let's see, some larger than others. Here's an interesting one. I did see finally, I think, observed at Daily Kos. Now that I think about it, I should have put aside the Daily Kos reporting on. I wonder if I can scroll back and find it. Did Hunter do this one? I thought this was sort of up his alley. And speaking of which, I know there's some other recommended stories in here that people have said, oh, you ought to pay attention to this one. Yes, there it is. I did think Hunter had done this one. Trump sent the military to build a new border fence. Remember when he dispatched troops down there and they were sitting there eating MREs within view of like Kentucky Fried Chicken and stuff. But so they went down there and they stretched out all that concertina wire. We were instructed to, it wasn't barbed wire. It's different. It's concertina wire. Okay. Not really certain why the emphasis on the difference, but they were making a big deal out of it. Anyway, Trump sent military down to build a new border fence. Thieves are now making off with it. This is some kind of story. Even before Donald Trump declared a national emergency at the southern border, which was fake anyway, because refugees were trying to cross and Trump's toxic base doesn't like that, the xenophobe in chief had ordered active U.S. troops to the border to, quote, support border patrol efforts and to string a few sections of makeshift border fence using concertina wire, more commonly known as razor wire. It may have meant thousands in America's armed forces were spending the holidays away from their families, but at least the border would be, quote, secure, right? Finally, an impenetrable military line worthy of our status as a great power. Or, not that. Because thieves in Tijuana, Mexico are simply making off with sections of the wire and selling them to city homeowners who are using it to shore up their own home security. Some homes in the same area had the the identical wire installed in front of their homes as an added layer of protection to their property lines and fences, but residents declined to comment about how they obtained the material. This is a quote from, who's reporting about this? The San Diego Union Tribune's coverage of the story. Tijuana officials report between 15 and 20 arrests for the nighttime thefts, while government contractors on this side of the border work to replace the stolen wire. There is no word on how the mighty American administration will respond to this dangerous attack on our military fortifications. Will Trump order military action? Perhaps a shock and awe style incursion into Mexico to retrieve the stolen wire? Are airstrikes in order? Surely we are dealing with dangerous foes if they've managed to make off with Donald Trump's border wall, armed only with a pair of snippers and a handful of zip ties. Fear not, however. If Donald Trump can bring North Korea to the negotiating table, getting absolutely not a damn thing in exchange for severely curtailing military exercises with their South Korean enemies, it is certain he will deal with this problem with the same keen strategic thinking. But as of right now, Mexican homeowners are building walls and America is paying for them. That is the most hilarious part of this. That's the bottom line of it. They're building walls because walls work, everybody. I remember when it was the Trumpsters' delight to point out that everyone who opposed the wall was a hypocrite if they lived in a building because that had walls, and walls work. They keep people out. I get the point, but it's really more about holding up a roof than anything else. But okay, maybe home defense. People get into that. So apparently there's some increase in, and they'll point to this as being in their favor, I'm sure, some increase in crime in Tijuana anyway, and I guess, if there's any validity to the theory, in other border towns on the Mexican side of the border, where I guess the claim will be that immigrants who have been successfully held back from crossing into the United States or seeking asylum at a legal border crossing, however you want to, whichever segment of the immigrant population you might be talking about, and however you want to describe it. I guess that creates, it could certainly create a backup of relatively desperate refugees who find themselves now stuck in a single place without much in the way of resources or ability to secure them in any legal way. There might be, I don't know, it might be real that there's an increase in crime. It might just be imaginary. People fear that's what's going to happen. That's all it takes for them to decide, you know what? The Americans had, and I guess Trump can point to this as positive too. The Mexicans think the concertina wire is a good idea. So good that they stole the concertina wire and put it around their houses because concertina wire works. But it doesn't work for having it carried away. I mean, I guess eventually you'll just find that thieves in Tijuana will steal the concertina wire from the houses and I presume put it around their stash of ill-gotten gains, right? I imagine that there's a treasure trove somewhere, like they discover in the cartoons. Daffy Duck finds finds the treasure and goes swimming in the gold coins, right? I'm rich. Well, if you find such a thing and you want to protect it, obviously concertina wire is the way to go. And it's free for the taking from outside of the homes of the wealthy individuals living in Tijuana, Mexico. But on the other hand, you know, how will they ever foil this fence? What about if they cut a piece of it and walk away with it? And then there's a giant hole in there. Well, it's a plan. Let's see. That's a pretty crazy one. I also have here, I'll note for the record, I don't know whether it's worth reading. I think probably not. But it's worth noting that the Washington Post has a piece here. Lisa Iannucci has sent me this one, along with an angry note. Not angry at me, angry at them. An opinion piece. Charles Kushner says, "Here's the truth about my family and our business." I gather that it is probably not the truth. He's a bit of a liar himself and a convicted felon, but he's offering up his idea about how they are self-made or what have you and how they do business on the up and up all the time, except for when I'm getting arrested and imprisoned for my frauds. Or I guess except when we find out that when your son Jared became CEO, he forgot to get the certificates of occupancy for 9 of your buildings. But what about all the buildings he didn't forget to get a certificate of occupancy for? Why aren't you focusing on that? I don't think I'm going to read Charles's defense of his son, although it might make interesting reading perhaps off the air at some point. I don't know whether it's anything that specifically needs debunking or is just like eye roll material, but we will see. Let's see. Other items in pocket. Where are we on our break? Yes, another one coming up soon. Perhaps we can discuss a few other interesting notes here. Maybe we can squeeze this one in, or at least the beginning of the discussion, see how far this takes us. I noted a David Dayen tweet, or a pair of tweets yesterday, saying about this story on CNBC. Says, "This could not be more perfect. The culture of corporations buying their way out of their crimes with settlements could provide a chunk of the funding for the border wall." I guess Trump has found a source of money inside the federal coffers that he thinks he can tap for emergency spending on the border wall. And it's funds that have ended up in federal hands by way of court settlements when the Department of Justice, for instance, sues someone for, let's say, antitrust or something like that, and they reach a settlement during which, or as part of which, the defendant, in admitting no guilt, of course, decides to pay a voluntary fine to the Department of Justice for their antitrust activities. And I guess those funds aren't earmarked or locked away in any particular fund dedicated for certain use. And even if they were, the president would think that his emergency declaration entitled him to raid those funds. David Dayen points out that particular irony because, of course, the Obama administration had a particular penchant for settling these cases in exchange for payments in lieu of fines. How ironic would it be if that money paid for the wall? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's take a quick look back at this. Just to read again David Dayen's first tweet here about this story. This could not have been more perfect. The culture of corporations buying their way out of crimes with settlements could provide a chunk of the funding for the border wall. He followed that up by saying, so we define down accountability to a meaningless payoff. Democratic leaders from Obama on down promote it as justice, and the money goes to fulfill the xenophobic dream those same Democrats denounce. That would be a particular irony, but also is supposed to point up that maybe there's something we ought to be pursuing other than cash payments in lieu of fines or prison terms for people who break the laws, though they are white-collar laws, and I've got another piece in here somewhere, actually. I wasn't planning on spending time on it necessarily, but it would make probably a good follow-up. But where is the piece? It's not that far down, I don't think. Yes. A Washington Post piece from the other day. It's not just Paul Manafort. This is why white-collar criminals often evade harsh punishment. Perhaps we could look into that. But first, the CNBC article about which David is talking here. Elon, this is a good name for me in the morning. Elon, Y-L-A-N, perhaps, Mui, M-U-I. I've probably murdered both parts of that. But writing for CNBC here, Trump wants to use a big banking settlement to help build his border wall. The White House, here's a bunch of bullet points that they're using just below the title here. The White House is targeting a windfall from an international banking scandal to help pay for the border wall, according to an administration official. French bank, French, Société Générale, maybe I've got that right, struck a deal with the U.S. government in November. At least that's under the Trump administration. They would have been the ones to collect that. Struck a deal in November to pay $1.3 billion after admitting that it violated U.S. sanctions on Cuba and Iran for years. Interesting. So a particular score, I would think, for the Trump administration here. The administration is hoping to funnel as much as $359 million from that settlement to a special account at the Treasury Department to fund the wall, the official says. Let's take a look now at the body of the article. The White House is targeting a windfall from an international... Well, that was one of the bullet points. So most of the top of the article, in fact, reproduces those bullet points. So it's unclear whether the White House can use the money for the wall. So they will just do it and then say, sue us and sell the piece of the wall that we build with it to get your money back if you think we've done it illegally. So they're not sure if they can use it. The Treasury account, known as the Asset Forfeiture Fund, is made up of cash, property, and other items seized during civil and criminal investigations. That's a very controversial fund all by itself. Property seizure and asset forfeiture, a very controversial practice on the state and local level, as well as I'm sure the federal level is. I'm sure there are no slouches in this stuff. And maybe if the kind of property that they own is right, maybe they could just pile it up in lieu of a wall. A giant barrier of Lamborghinis and such that they've seized from drug dealers who apparently live in movies as opposed to real life. Okay, so the asset forfeiture fund, made up of cash, property, and other items seized during civil and criminal investigations, is what they're thinking of using here. Use of the funds is restricted by federal law, so who cares about that? And the account itself is a lightning rod for criticism, with both conservatives and liberals calling it an example of government overreach. In its 2017 annual report, the fund listed total assets worth $4 billion. So did Trump, but they might even be right. Fundamentally, this is just a slush fund of money taken from private citizens that law enforcement officials are allowed to use for their own purposes, said Robert McNamara, not the one you're thinking of, a senior attorney with the Libertarian Institute for Justice. President Donald Trump declared a national emergency at the border, even though there isn't one, in an effort to build the wall largely without congressional approval and funding. Instead, the administration is attempting to cobble together $8 billion from spending that has already been authorized this fiscal year. About $3.6 billion will be drawn from previous allocations for military construction. Another $2.5 billion would come from counter-drug activities at the Defense Department. And why spend any money on counter-drug activities, right? That is not a crisis of any kind. The spending deal that Congress passed in January also included $1.4 billion for fencing and other structures. Another $601 million from Treasury's Asset Forfeiture Fund would fill the gap. According to the administration, about $242 million is already available in the fund. The remaining $359 million will come from future and anticipated forfeitures, notably the settlement with Société Générale, or SocGen. I don't know how they would pronounce it, so if it's society, right? Two administration officials said the bank's forfeiture is still awaiting final court approval. How ironic would it be if conservative Trump judges decided not to bother fining the bank because it's a bank and therefore rich and it shouldn't have to pay, and then it wasn't there, the money wasn't there for the wall. But another person familiar with the settlement said SocGen has finished making its payments, with the funds split among federal and state authorities. It is unclear exactly how much was destined for Treasury or the forfeiture fund, probably because they didn't do any paperwork on it. The fund's assets are typically used to reimburse other agencies and state and local governments for their work on the investigation. The money may also go to informants or victims in the cases. The fund's annual report says any money left over after accounting for operational costs for the next fiscal year can be earmarked for strategic support and made available for any law enforcement activity. Whether that includes the president's border wall is up for debate. If Congress is supposed to be in charge of appropriations, we shouldn't be setting up funds that the executive can self-fund based on how many people it shakes down, McNamara said. Other attempts by the administration to pinpoint a pot of money for the wall have been met with resistance because he's really good at getting things done or whatever. Early reports that the White House was considering using disaster money did not sit well with the Republican lawmakers such as Kevin Brady, whose Texas district was hit by Hurricane Harvey. Now, Democrats are slamming plans to use money intended for military construction to build the border barrier. In response to a letter from top Democratic senators, the Defense Department said it would not divert funds from military housing barracks, and dorms. Only projects with award dates after this fiscal year would be affected, the department said. More than $10 billion of other top priorities that the military and their families have requested over the last several years is on the chopping block to placate the president. Senators Dick Durbin, Patrick Leahy, and Brian Schatz said in a joint statement this week, the madness will not stop until more of our Republican colleagues are willing to put the military ahead of party politics. Do you think they would be willing to do that? Last week, the House and Senate passed a resolution to block the national emergency, but Trump vetoed it Friday, allegedly. His declaration faces an uncertain future in the Democrat-controlled House, which will vote on whether to override the veto later this month. The Senate does not appear to have enough support to overturn the veto, at least at the moment. So, not an inaccurate statement of things. But what an interesting situation all by itself. Let's see. Do we want at this point to go to that other piece about white-collar crime and why? I mean, do we not all know why they evade harsh punishment? I mean, it's usually white people. Is that it? I don't know. It's a monkey cage analysis, so it's probably better than that. But let's see. This is a piece again in the Washington Post. Brett Curry and Banks Miller. The guy's name is Banks. So I don't know. Do we trust him? It's not just Paul Manafort, they say. This is why white-collar criminals often evade harsh punishment. We found some surprising data in our research, these two say. Last week, former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort was sentenced in the second of two federal trials stemming from crimes uncovered during special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation of, you know what it was about, right? Okay. Judge T.S. Ellis III has already sentenced Manafort to 4 years in his Eastern District of Virginia case. The week before, Judge Amy Berman Jackson of Washington added 3.5 more years to his punishment. Many observers harshly criticized Ellis's sentence in particular. The judge could have put Manafort in prison for up to 24 years for his conviction on 8 counts of bank and tax fraud. Getting tired here. Which prosecutors claimed amounted to at least $12 million, and some suggest maybe closer to $30 million. Now that's something that they might want to grab and use for the wall. And I don't know whether should we be madder about that or not. I'm not sure. I mean, it's sort of like cheating to put Manafort away, but to use the money you stole from him by locking him up for the wall. I mean, maybe that's appropriate. If it's going to be built, it should be paid for, and the Mexicans aren't going to pay for it. At least it should be paid for by Manafort. Observers noted Ellis's sentence fell well below that recommended by federal guidelines, which the judge called excessive given Manafort's otherwise blameless life. Jackson also said that the sentencing guidelines applied to Manafort were excessive. Although her sentence wasn't as widely criticized, she nevertheless gave Manafort about half the time he could have faced. Manafort's comparatively short sentence has been protested by lawyers, television commentators, politicians, and other citizens. But according to our findings from research on the behavior of federal prosecutors, recently published as the book U.S. Attorneys, Political Control, and Career Ambition, Manafort's sentence is consistent with those given in other white-collar criminal cases. Relying on criminal case data obtained from the Justice Department between 1986 and 2015, we found that the median sentence is 7.5 months for all cases classified as white-collar by the Justice Department between 1992 and 2015. Wow. For comparison, the median sentence in drug cases, the single largest category in our data, is 58 months. Fully 37% of those convicted of a white-collar crime evade prison altogether. Only 9% of narcotics offenders escape incarceration. There are myriad reasons for these trends. First, white-collar cases are complex. That an explanation independent of any questions of racial bias. I think I think that's what they're trying to argue. I'm not certain that it's entirely so, but let's continue. It's an interesting explanation. The white-collar cases are complex. In a narcotics or immigration case, prosecutors simply have to prove that the accused actually possessed the drug in the quantities at issue, or helped people without proper documents cross the border. By contrast, those who prosecute white-collar financial crimes must prove that the defendant intended to defraud others. And that's true. I guess the intent portion of it here, you could legislate that away. I guess we ought to say at bottom here, we should remember that this is a choice. You have the option of deciding that it will be like a strict liability issue and simply say, if you helped a person get across the border, it really doesn't matter whether you intended to do it. It's not something you can, that's what they do now. But if you defraud somebody of the money, well, I didn't intend to, but in that case, sometimes you have people who have custodial responsibility for money or some other property that you think they're embezzling, and they're just saying, well, I thought I was doing the right thing with the money. Well, that might be a stupid statement, but you have to prove that they hoped to gain exclusive control of the money for their own benefit. And sometimes the financial arrangements are complex enough that it's a gray area. Whose money is this anyway, and who's got control? Anyway, it is a choice, though. You can legislate things to be different. We simply choose not to because I think the other reason, white, not the collar, the people. But maybe the collar, too. Anyway, by contrast, we said, white-collar financial crimes, when they're prosecuted, you have to prove that the defendant intended to defraud others. Second, white-collar crimes often involve Byzantine accounting schemes without any witnesses. That can make it quite difficult to prove that the accused intended to evade the law. Third, Supreme Court decisions and pressure from public officials and lawyers who primarily defend those accused of white-collar crimes add still more obstacles to prosecution. That's true, too. They tend also to be high-dollar lawyers who maybe even are actually excellent at their craft and therefore are high-dollar lawyers, very pricey, and they put on a more aggressive defense. It's entirely possible that somebody could stand there on an immigration case, if they were willing to do so, paid or otherwise, and say, it was not the defendant's intention to break federal immigration laws. It was their intent to grant the people in question here the opportunity for a better life. And after all, isn't that something, truth, justice, the American way? But you could try and spend the time and present a defense of that sort and say, sure, the law says you're not supposed to do things this way, but it wasn't never my intention to break immigration law. I simply wanted to do the right thing, and it's not my fault that immigration law forces us to do the wrong thing. It won't work in the main, but nobody really even has tried it because, for the most part, nobody has the money to pay the kind of lawyer it would take to have that kind of chutzpah to stand there and say that that ought to be the outcome. But what can I tell you? It's not that that doesn't exist, right? We read about Devin Nunes's suit just yesterday. Those lawyers do exist. They will do it. Some of them are actually pretty good at it, too. Like, in terms of looking like they think they mean it. Alan Dershowitz, for instance. All right. And then third, of course, decisions and pressure from public officials and lawyers who primarily defend those accused of white-collar crimes, adding more obstacles to prosecution. Finally, many former U.S. attorneys and assistant U.S. attorneys later join law firms that defend those accused of white-collar crimes. For those considering such a career trajectory, it may be useful to pursue white-collar cases while being, quote, reasonable about the sentences. As they interact with defense counsels who may later wish to hire them, it can literally pay to be congenial. We found evidence that winning longer white-collar sentences decreases a U.S. attorney's likelihood of later being hired by a large law firm. That is pretty interesting. Political context also influences sentences for white-collar crimes, as the partisanship of those in government changes. So do the policy priorities of the U.S. attorneys, who are typically replaced en masse with a change in administration. Consider the fact that Republicans are traditionally expected to favor business interests more than Democrats. Consistent with that, when Republicans control Congress, we find that white-collar sentences are, on average, 24% shorter than when Democrats do. But to our surprise, we found that during Republican administrations, white-collar sentences are significantly longer than under Democratic presidents. This may be a result of greater reluctance to prosecute these cases in Republican administrations. The rate of white-collar case filings is 16% lower during Republican administrations than Democratic ones. This suggests that only more serious cases are selected for prosecution in Republican administrations, resulting in higher average sentences. Many think judges appointed by Democratic presidents view white-collar criminals more harshly than their Republican-appointed colleagues. Manafort's sentences are consistent with that perception. Ellis was an appointee of Ronald Reagan. Barack Obama appointed Jackson. Finally, Manafort is white, which may have helped reduce his sentence. Research has shown that on average, African Americans receive 2 more months than do similarly situated white defendants in the federal judicial system. The racial disparity results from decisions made by both federal judges and federal prosecutors. Manafort's story is unusual. As a one-time chairman of a successful presidential campaign and a long-time political operative, and as one of the targets of the much-watched Mueller investigation, he is highly visible. His federal conviction and sentence could disappear entirely or be reduced by presidential pardon, although the New York Attorney General is charging him with mortgage fraud and falsifying business records, which suggests that his legal woes are far from over. But otherwise, he's had a pretty typical experience as a white-collar defendant in the federal system. The writers, by the way, Brett Curry, a professor of political science, but he's professional, I'm sure, at Georgia Southern University. Banks Miller, an associate professor of political science and public policy at the University of Texas at Dallas. And both together the authors of U.S. Attorney's Political Control and Career Ambition. An interesting look then, an interesting follow-up to the white-collar crime issues presented by Kushner and the like, who apparently have no particular interest in complying with the law, doing their paperwork, and of course, even if caught, they can settle out of court and pay a fine, and that fine can be used to build the border wall, and they won't find themselves locked up for very long anyway, thanks to the factors at work and pointed out here in this article. Okay, let's see. Other interesting stories that we might want to include in the closing minutes here. There were definitely a few others. Let me see. I guess this is becoming a hot topic again, and I don't think I need to explain all over again exactly why this is the case, but I did put aside, just as a reminder that this is happening, a piece from a few days ago. All right, we got to hang on while this is a brand new computer. You shouldn't be having this much trouble opening up this piece here for CNBC. Maybe their website is slow. In the meantime, I can read this text, though I'm not certain I can attribute the story properly, because Pocket's view is sometimes a little screwed up when it comes to that. Almost there in opening. Okay, Tucker Higgins. I love these names that people work under here. For CNBC, noting end of last week, I think, former FBI Director James Comey says he doesn't know if a subpoena would work for the Mueller report. I hope they don't get to that. The point being made here is many members of Congress saying, well, the Mueller report needs to be released publicly. And if it's not, if Trump tries to block its release, we will subpoena that report from Mueller's office, from the DOJ. I don't know who they would be approaching for that. But Comey noting that, hey, that might not work. And it might not work for all the reasons that we know from having listened to the program for many years. For those of you who actually do that. Former FBI Director James Comey on Friday said that he did not know if Democrats could obtain an unredacted copy of the Mueller report, if there is one, with a subpoena if the Department of Justice declined to release it. I'm sure they can subpoena. They definitely can issue subpoenas for anything they want to the Department of Justice. Whether the department will compel, or I guess he means comply here, will abide an order to compel is what he actually, I guess he's restating it. Whether they will abide an order to compel, if they resist that, I don't know where that ends up, he said. We've gone over this in the past, but for personal testimony. But same thing for documents. Comey said he hoped that a subpoena would not be necessary. There is a lot of transparency that is possible under the law, and so that's my answer. I'm not sure about the can. I hope they don't get to that, he said. Not much of an answer, really. House Democrats, including the chairs of the powerful Intelligence and Judiciary Committees, have said they will subpoena the Department of Justice if the report is not made public. Comey, whose ouster by President Donald Trump in 2017 precipitated the appointment of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, was responding to a question from a student during a rare hour-long question and answer session at his alma mater, William and Mary. The talk came nearly a year after his CNN town hall there. I guess he does this fairly frequently. It's not all that rare. The college last year tapped the erstwhile government official to teach a class on ethical leadership. I'm not sure that was a great idea. On Friday, he said he hoped the little advertised forum, which he jokingly dubbed a, quote, secret lecture series, Trump will pick up on that one, would open up the lessons of that class to a wider audience. He said that with regard to the Mueller report, his hope is that the Attorney General will try to draw upon the precedents of the Department of Justice, which are extensive, that in a case with intensive public interest, that the Department of Justice will share details with the American people. He expanded on the arguments that he made in an article published earlier this month in the Washington Post. He wrote in the article that Republicans were incorrect in saying that transparency about Mueller's conclusions was impossible. His comments came during a moment of particularly intense public interest in the special counsel, who is investigating, of course, links between the Trump campaign and Russia. Earlier in the day, Trump had said there should be no report. On Thursday, the House of Representatives unanimously passed a symbolic resolution calling for the document's public release. Comey said the House vote was good news. I don't think I've seen the House of Representatives vote unanimously for anything in my entire life, Comey said on Friday. They actually have in several times. He just never bothered to take note of it because it wasn't important stuff, at least in his view. But they voted unanimously yesterday, meaning last week, the sense of the House that there ought to be transparency around the Mueller report consistent with the law. The former FBI director has faced intense public scrutiny for his actions in the lead-up, of course, to the 2016 presidential election. In June, a government watchdog slammed Comey for being insubordinate. Much of the focus has been on a letter Comey sent to Congress shortly before Election Day. You know this story, of course, saying he had uncovered new information that could be significant to the investigation into Hillary Clinton's classified materials handling. Clinton's lead in the polls sank decisively, and some have blamed him for her defeat. But Comey on Friday offered a stern defense of his decisions. You care what it was? I don't. And we don't have time for it anyway. You know what? He's given the excuses before. The most important part about this is what he's not actually stating here, but you already know as a listener to the show, is that if the Department of Justice were to be subpoenaed for the release of the report and simply ignore the subpoena, the next step would be for the Congress to hold the Department of Justice and the requisite officials in contempt of Congress, for which they would, of course, then be prosecuted in courts, most likely in the district court in D.C., but they would almost certainly be prosecuted in that by, well, it would almost have to be, right? A U.S. attorney or someone appointed by the Justice Department. Suppose they simply said, we don't think that's actually something that we should be prosecuting, and we're not going to do it. What's the result? Well, no report and no prosecution.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
Yes, there is, of course, the option of inherent contempt, and we'll discuss that probably later on, maybe tomorrow. But right now, time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast. I've lost my place here. Oh, my goodness. Okay, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. Woo, I'm tired. See you tomorrow.